morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. My wife sent me an article. It was kind of charming, really. It was about a woman that supposedly had lived 305 years. Now, then she said afterwards, I don't want to get that old. You know, and I can appreciate that. A lot of people don't want to get that old. So to help her make her feel better, I looked up, and the oldest living person that was confirmed lived to 122 years and I forget how many months. And they passed away back in the 1990s. So the good news, you're not going to make it to 300. Now, that's a bit morbid, but it gave me a valuable insight to the human psyche. We have a disposable economy because we ourselves are disposable beings. Think about that. Did you know about that extremely elderly woman? Either the claim of 305 or the verified 122-year-old woman. No, you didn't. We're almost psychologically conditioned to accept that we're not immortal. We fight against it. We invent new technologies. We have rituals that promise us an afterlife. And I'm not going to insult people that practice those rituals. Quite the opposite. I think it's a relatively healthy coping mechanism. But the fact is, we're all disposable. Yes, some people will be remembered. Genghis Khan, Pharaoh Akhenaten, Pharaoh Tutankhamun. The list goes on. There are some very few who have achieved immortality through their works. But generally that's because they've done something so wild and so radical, it changed the world. The rest of us are disposable fake people. Now I have a slight chance, very slight chance, at immortality. And that's simply because once something is put on the internet, it stays there. Maybe YouTube makes it 200 years, maybe YouTube makes it 500 years. Maybe my books are still being published back then, maybe they're not. No guarantees. But the average person working their 9 to 5, going home watching The Twilight Zone, eating, sleeping, defecating, fornicating, and then wake up the next day and start it all again. Not necessarily in that order, but people are freaky. Do you think those people are going to be remembered in a couple hundred years? My parents have an album. I don't want to call it an album. Let's call it a collage. And it's photographs dating back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, and all of our family members are listed. But their names are written on the back. Because while I've heard stories of some of them, and I remember my grandmother, oh, that guy ruined his heart and that's why he passed away so young. This guy was as tall as you were. I remember all that, but I don't have faces to associate with the names. I did not meet these people. They're generations before me. And the only reason they're remembered is because I keep them in mind. Not necessarily in a reverential way, but more of a curiosity way. When my existence on this mortal coil ends, the knowledge of who they were may be lost forever. And then what are you? You're a photo. Again, Silverlight loves to watch old, early Edison photography and filmation. I like to see the different way people lived back when. But it reminds me of the mortality inherent of being a human being. I'm a student of Becker. Ernest Becker postulated that the first thought coming into existence is appreciating your existence. The second thought is of your own mortality. If you came from nowhere, you realize you're going to wind up nowhere. And that's the truth. Each one of us lives our lives. You're not going to say in gripping terror, but the thought's there every day that this could be my last day. There's a number of expressions. Live every day as though it may be your last, for it might. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. All true. Fairly morbid, but you can't really dispute the validity of them because that's our experience. At my relatively young age, lost a lot of friends. Some through, mutual distaste, and others because God's plan for them had come to an end. And they live on through my memory and nothing else. Do you think anything you've done is going to make the test of time? 200 years, 500 years. Let's not do thousands of years. Let's keep it reasonable. And if you haven't, that's not your fault. It's what society shows. At 8 to 12 years old, school is saying you better decide what you want to be in life because you need to start angling your education to get that way. True-ish. If you want to be a doctor or a scientist or an astronaut, you better be showing that you're one of the outstanding specimens from that time. But no matter what career you choose, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a president, the time comes when you'll just be set aside and you'll make way for somebody new, whether organically by losing an election or other means. And as Clausewitz said, war is the politics by any other means. There's 7.5 billion people on this planet at the present time. It's a staggering amount. Some, maybe they come from a family of all girls. Likely one of them's going to reproduce. Another might come from a family of all boys and they decide that they don't want to reproduce. So how do you gauge your immortality? You can't. You have no measurable way of gauging what's going to happen to you in even 5 years. This is a morbid subject, but it's important to confront these feelings in ourselves. Most people feel relatively immortal. 20s, 30s, 40s, even into your 50s, you're not really seeing intense bodily changes. Correction, let me change that. Let's hope that you don't suffer from a disability or disease that causes you to experience that earlier than you should. Because there's plenty of diseases and disorders and all sorts of things that can make a person's life unpleasant. And yeah, Silverlight wishes harm on nobody. Quite the opposite. He wishes success and healthiness. He knows it's unreasonable, but that's his wish anyway. But there's still people out there playing touch football, tackle football. And a few people have made it near their 50s playing the NFL, dropping to the CFL, dropping to the arena leagues, all that sort of thing. Hockey. I'm not insulting the hockey guys here, but Gordie Howe played every decade right into his 70s. Was it Gordie Howe? I forget who it was. But one of them holds that record. And I'm sure the other team said, that's Gordie Howe. We're not going to body check him at full speed. But at the same token, we're going to remind him that this is a game. And that's very respectable. Gordie Howe, again, somebody who's earned that immortality accolade. But I'm sure half of you don't know who the heck I'm talking about. Very famous hockey player, but not everybody follows hockey. Space. Neil Armstrong, very famous person, first person to step on the moon, on another celestial body. But you know what? A lot of people still have the attitude space is not relevant to me. Even in 2024, we got flat earthers, we got satellites going over our head. Now, technically, your cell phones go through towers, not through satellites. But when you have GPS, Google Images, and all this sort of things, uh, the denial is extreme. But again, they're trying to force their immortality. They're special. They're the ones that believe they're calling the establishment out as some sort of weird echo of the 1960s hippies who were calling the establishment out for horrible things that they were doing. But the modern ones, yeah, they're too busy embracing an alternative theory because, hey, if they're right and everybody's wrong, they're going to go down in history. Alternative medicine. I don't have a problem with alternative medicine, provided it's not something that's actually going to cause harm. I used to go to a naturopath, and one of the things I liked about my naturopath, she said, follow your doctor's advice for your particular condition, and I'm going to rebuild everything around it. She didn't sell her own cures. She said, you need melatonin to help you sleep. I've always had a problem sleeping. She didn't sell it to me. She just would give me a list. You need this, and then I could go to any pharmacy and fill it up. That's somebody working within the system. She's retired, not because of old age, but because she did fairly well for herself and wanted to move to a different location. And she's forgotten by everybody but me. Well, and her parents. I'm pretty sure at one point she said her parents were in town. But that's the sad truth of this nasty, brutish life, as Locke once put it. We are sad brutes, stumbling about in our own way. Sure, we open our minds, we read inspiring books, we listen to a symphony, whether that symphony be by Bach or whether it be by any of the modern composers. Let's just go with Queen, because they did rock symphonies. And we transcend ourselves for a few minutes. And that's the value that we can do. Creativity. My father unearthed this boulder, and he was building an extension onto the house, and this boulder, I don't know how heavy it is, even though I've moved it a couple times in my life. It's extremely heavy. It takes 4 people to move it. I don't know what you have in your house that would be about the same size, but you would not be able to fit this in a car or an SUV. You'd need minimum a straight truck. It is gigantic. Eventually, he wound up using it in kind of, I'm going to call it a rock garden. It's not a true rock garden, but it's the central feature. Now, my parents are going to get rid of that house one way or the other. And the next people who move in and the people after that are going to wonder why there's a gigantic boulder, because they're going to want to garden at some point. They're going to start digging away at that thing and say, oh my God, what do we have here? And the people that know the story are not going to be around to tell them. So they'll have to make up their own myths. Maybe it was here when, because as far as I know, that addition never happened. And it would be a pretty tall tale to assume that we dug it up, because it's too big for one person to carry. Well, at that point, the house was small, so you could get a small size backhoe back there and lift it out. Today, it would not be possible because of how much room the house takes on the property. So, logically, your only course of action is to make up your own mythology. Again, this is where we're crossing that line between reality and myth. The myths we tell ourselves to explain the seemingly impossible, where a perfectly normal explanation would do, but since we're not aware of that original explanation, we have to make things up. Now, whatever you believe about the afterlife, I'm not going to argue. You might have it right. You might have it wrong. There's no way for us to check. And I like it that way. There should always be a little bit of mystery in life. But like I said, what have you personally done that you think deserves to live forever? the Causa Sui project, as it's so called, the validating yourself. This doesn't mean you have to go out and run and buy a sculpture kit so that you can put it together and say that you made that sculpture. This is a self-reflecting thing. Because unfortunately, all the good deeds and the bad deeds, the hard work that you did, everything that you stood for, will be forgotten in a shorter time period than you think. So, my mission to you today is to seek your own immortality, to seek your own vitality, to be creative, because honestly, that's the only way that you can possibly pass on a legacy and be remembered. Good luck to everybody. It's a hard challenge, but I think it would be awesome for people to try. With that, we wish to thank you for joining us for today's show. If you enjoyed it, please like or dislike it if you didn't enjoy it, because it is a tough concept to come to grips with. Share, because sharing is caring, and again, I believe this is an important subject. Subscribe, unless you've subscribed already, in which case, thank you. Don't forget to click the notification icon so that way you can be notified whenever we come up with a new episode, which is usually every day. I take the odd one off, but anyways, with that, we hope you have a fantastic day and enjoy the time that you are allotted on this planet.